Hello, AP English Lit. It's a time of contagion, but let us remove our masks, the faces that we create to meet the faces that we meet, and let us share thoughts on literature. How you guys doing? It's early in the morning, but here I am. Hopefully you looked at the agenda, which I'll have you do before you hit the video link generally and get a sense of what the homework is and what the do now might be. So I did ask you guys to do a do now briefly. Mainly, I want to go over questions number 4 through 13 about a dollhouse. We got to finish a dollhouse. You guys know that we're not doing open question. That's not one of the essays being offered on the test this year. It's just prose style analysis. But we got all the way through Dollhouse, and I'd like to wrap it up and just show you a few last things, trying to appreciate this perfectly symmetrical, marvelously written play by Ibsen. All right, so that's the main thing I'm doing today is I'm just flying through the questions. I'm not going to have you guys turn in the notebooks, obviously. I'm not going to have you turn in the questions themselves, 4 through 13. But if you did them, which you should have, it'll help inform you on the book sum sheet, which I'm going to have you guys go ahead and do a book sum sheet for Dollhouse, just like you did for the summer reading novel before the first assignment you basically did for me this school year. And I've attached a description of that book sum sheet to this communication, so that should be good. The 19th century husband's letter to the wife, I've gotten a few of those from you guys, but I'm going to give you a little extension on that. Let's try and get done with that by Wednesday. And I meet again with you guys on Thursday. So get that done and send it to me as Google Doc. If you need the document itself, the letter and the essay, let me know. But that's one of the things I really want to use to sum up this novel, this play meaningfully, because again, we're reading it different than it was read in 1879. It's one of the best examples in literature of the radically different readings that audiences will get based on their location and time and even space, I suppose. Okay, so letter is due, that work is due by Wednesday. Let's try to do it even though deadlines are flexible. And let's get the book sum sheet done by Sunday, so I can take a look at the thematic statements and hopefully share out a few gems that you guys came up with when I talk to you guys again on Monday. All right, so if you looked at rank as a noun, an adjective, and a verb, you realize it has multiple connotations, just like we've been talking about all year. Ibsen's careful with his names, as we talked about. Rank as a noun means social rank or position, right? Is everybody obsessed with social position in this play? Hugely. It's one of the organizing principles of this meditation on our so-called selves and these little boxes that we are expected to squeeze into: the gender box, the race box, the sexuality box, right? The class box, right? That we're selves, but that we shift in and out or squeeze ourselves in and out of these boxes, right? So I want to do kind of a meditation at the end of this question review about box switching and all of the substitution that goes on in this play. It's another one of the perfectly symmetrical things about this play I want you to appreciate. All right. So noun rank is position. To rank people is to put them in a hierarchy, right? Which we're going to do with question 5 and 6 here, which ask you to sort of rank the characters morally or in terms of their attitudes toward money, right? Last meaning of rank, the adjective is stanky, as from decay, right? And remember that Rank, Dr. Rank in our play, is suffering from tuberculosis. No, he's not. He's suffering from syphilis because nobody can really say what's going on here. And his spine is being eaten away. Why? Because his daddy frolicked as a young lieutenant and slept with prostitutes, I guess, and ended up contracting syphilis, right? So he is paying for the sins of his father. And Rank himself says, man, I didn't even get to enjoy any of that fun. I have to suffer for it, right? But this notion of the sins of the parents being visited upon the kids, that's huge in Dollhouse, right? Torvald blames Nora. Her daddy was degenerate or something, and that's why she's that way, right? But the larger commentary is that these boxes and social norms that we inherit, these total inhibitions of self, these two-dimensional constructs that we use to define ourselves when we're walking around presenting faces to meet the faces that we meet, right? That this is the terrible legacy of our parents and of society, that we've inherited these hollow social norms and traditions, and that they oppress us, and that most people don't ever think substantively upon those sorts of things, right? So the disease is social norms and propriety and all these other totally restrictive things, which, deny us from being our quote true selves. What the hell is a true self? I don't know. That's the question you're left with at the end. You know what a phony self is, right? Now you got to get around to the business of constructing a true self, and that is good luck. I mean, you're on your own there, right? There's not necessarily a model for that, but good luck on that. And I wish you some personal freedom amidst all the responsibilities and little boxes that you have to inhabit, right? Welcome to the human condition. And this is a larger way in which this play comments, as always, as all great art does, on the larger human condition, right? So 3 definitions of rank, all of which are obviously germane to our conversation here. But let's dive into question number 4 through 13, and I'll try and make this relatively short. I'm not going to use the whole 40 minutes. But again, you might want to take a few notes, and it will help you. I think it'll inform your execution of the book sum sheet, which is basically due next Sunday. All right. So another problem is, do we have our books? Because I want to read short fiction after we finish up Dollhouse, but that's a problem for another day. I have my book here, right? And again, it's question 4 through 13. So I'd appreciate it if you had that in front of you, or at least are in a position to take some notes, right? I'm going to fly through this pretty impressionistically, but let's go ahead and do it. So question 4 reads, how much time passes during the present action of the play from the opening of Act 1 to the final curtain? You tell me. In fact, somebody answer. Oh, yes. Kim? That's correct. Only 3 days pass, right? Who cares? We'll look at the particular 3 days that it is. It's the day before Christmas, Christmas, and then the day after Christmas. And what looms on the horizon is the new year. So winter, we've talked about that seasonal sort of figurative dimension, right? That winter is the time of death. What is dying? Well, people are switching, selves are being scrapped, and new selves or new attempts at self are being sort of instituted, right? So consider this delicate thing where 1 year is ending, or this is dying, and then the new year offers some sort of new promise. Is it a new self or a new hope? Or again, look at the way that resonates across the play. The 3 particular days are significant, right? Also Christmas, a big family time, as we talked about with Rocking Horse Winter, right? That this is the time when everybody's supposed to be so close and the family is supposed to be celebrated and all this stuff. Well, here we see a family exploding, or maybe imploding. I'm not sure, because it's empty at the center. Maybe that's what we're supposed to look at. So 3 days, right? But then the promise of the new year suggestively looming on the horizon. What events that occurred before the first act may be considered causes for the present action? I don't need to go too far into this, but 2 key ones are Mrs. Lynde's jilting of Krogstad back in the day, right? We only learn about that through the course of conversation. And also, of course, the trip to Italy that Nora takes, and the loan that she falsely gets, forges her father's signature in order to get that money and take the trip. We learn about all this stuff, right? And so, a lot of stuff is reported in the past. You just got to know that. The main thing, what events that take place during the present are reported rather than dramatized on the stage. The main one is the costume party in Act 3, right? We're down in the Helmer apartment, right? The costume party's going on upstairs. Nora's dancing in her ridiculous outfit, doing the Tarantella dance, this moving in seductively and then moving back. And look, I'm acting it out for you, right? But she's playing a role, obviously, this kind of sexualized elfin maid for Torvald. And Torvald's sitting there, of course, fantasizing across the room about her, like, I'll imagine you're my trembling beauty. I'm going to take you downstairs for the first time, and you're just all mine, my precious possession, which obviously says a lot about the way that he holds her. She's his little songbird. He keeps in the gilded cage and all that kind of stuff. But the costume party has larger figurative significance, obviously, as well. This whole attempt to define self, this whole gender dance, this whole construction of self is a costume party. And remember, at the end, Nora takes off her costume, right? And we're meant to see that as a visual symbol. It's not just simply literally taking off a costume. But this larger image, again, of the human condition as a dancing, phony costume party, where apes that like to wear things and affect position and rank, actually chimps do it too, but we dress ourselves up and construct an identity in perhaps a way that a chimpanzee is not obligated to, right? So that's something like what number 4 is getting at, right? Number 5, we start looking at actual ranking of characters. What's the significance of Mrs. Lind's former and present relationship to Krogstad? Uh, this was a true love relationship, it seems like, back in the day, which is rare in the 1870s in Norway, right? We know that Nora and Torvald might have had some actual feelings for each other as well, but this wasn't necessarily typical. Of course, we know that the beautiful love affair between Lind and Krogstad was doomed to be messed up by money, right? And so there's this huge interruption. And then later on, they're able to pick up the pieces, right, and do it. Money was this huge thing in the way, and position and all the other horseshit, getting in the way of these authentic and honest human emotions. And again, I think that's a big commentary of the play. Do Torvald and Nora love each other? We don't know, but we know that Lind and Krogstad do. And it's rather impressive that the villain in the end, the guy that starts off as the villain, is saved by love at the end of this whole thing, right? Kind of a beautiful thing. And then to what extent can Krogstad be labeled villain? I mean, to what extent is this guy the most moral character in the play? Look at the shady things that he's done. They were always for his kids or for his wife. He does some shady blackmail stuff to try and get his reputation back, but even that is for his kids, right? So I'm not saying he's the most moral, but it's worth asking because there's so much shifting and substitution. We talked about this. Krogstad moves out of the clear role of villain in the end, right, to be replaced with Torvald, arguably. Comparing his motives and actions in the past, again, we're asked to sort of rank Krogstad in relation to all these other people, right? Krogstad may be the greatest victim of circumstance in this entire play, but yes, he broke the law, but even Nora says at the end, you're going to tell me that you can't break a law for love or for your family or something? I'm not sure I believe in that law. She's questioning everything by the end, right? So Krogstad, awesome. And the symmetry with him and Mrs. Lind, I think, is a rather beautiful thing. Denied initially, and then they're able to pick up the pieces. Number 6, characterize Dr. Rank. Everybody else is kind of moving into a relationship or something. Rank is sick. He's got syphilis. His backbone's literally rotting away. That's why Rank likes a stanky as of something rotting, his backbone rotting away. He's alone, right? And he's on the margins trying to be an important part of the Helmers relationship. But he's pissy and sarcastic as a result, totally understandable. He exists outside of the gender dance to a certain way, but notice he wants in. All these boxes can be oppressive, but to be out alone outside of one is terrifying, right? So you want to be terrified, you want to be oppressed. I mean, that's the sort of false dichotomy, I think, that you're asked to do in terms of how am I going to construct a self? What is human freedom? What does it matter, right? What are his strengths, Dr. Rank? He loves Nora unconditionally, right? He's of high status. He's successful. He enjoys high social position. He's a doctor, for crying out loud. I'm sure many of our parents wouldn't mind if we became doctors and occupy that social position. Again, as much as anything for appearances rather than authentic happiness. He's got money. He is a good listener, as the saying goes. He listens to Nora. He listens to Torvald too, right? But the question is, how good a friend is he to Torvald? Maybe Rank is supposed to be this sort of morally unimpeachable character, but really, how good of a friend is he to Torvald? He's scamming on his wife. I mean, he talks to her all the time. He is completely in love with her and even runs interference for Nora when Torvald needs to be distracted and thrown off the trail. So nobody's morally perfect here, right? These are real flesh and blood, breathing, three-dimensional human beings that we've been talking about all year. And it's one of the great accomplishments of Ibsen in the late 1800s, this modern or realistic type of theater, right, is getting more to this attempt to be real instead of fantastical or have a commercial formula or a safe ending. Also notice, again, the sins of the parents thing comes together in Rank. The syphilis that he has is, again, figuratively, we inherit these social traditions and all this stuff. Let's move on to number 7. Major characters. We're talking about foil character here, right? Never forget foil character because you're going to see it all over the place in film, in literature, in drama. It's a good thing. And this is an excellent execution and use of foil character because we only have 5 characters and they reflect each other so delicately. But just a few things that you can notice. Nora and Krogstad both commit noble forgeries. They break the law for love, right? Nora had to get Torvald to Italy, and Krogstad had to support his kids, right? Lind and Rank, bad friends. I mean, or are they? Mrs. Lind, did she have to let the truth come out in the Helmer household? No, she could have had Krogstad bury that letter, get rid of it altogether. The truth wouldn't have come out. But Mrs. Lind says, no, the truth must come out, right? And the question is, does she just want to spite Nora, who's been sort of lording her perfect social position and womanhood and all those ways over her kids, her husband, her bank account? Is she spitefully getting revenge on her, or is there an authentic attempt to be a good friend by really dragging her out of her comfort zone and putting her on an uncertain path, right? Which, if you read the 19th century husband's letter to the wife, you know that a woman did not leave home. She had no options out there. It's not really even a realistic option what Nora did. But it's interesting that Ibsen ends the play right there. Nora and Rank are both pretty selfish and self-indulgent. Rank is very sensuous. He's smoking cigars and having Nora light them for him, hint, hint, and, drinking lots of champagne. He's like, hey, you might as well live if you're going to die. So he knows that his death is impending, and it sort of creates this sort of carpe diem almost aspect in him, just to hit some of the stuff that we've already talked about earlier this year. Torvald and Krogstad, obsessed with position. As men, we see them as defined by their bank account and all this stuff. They're both probably workaholics. We know that Torvald is, right? But again, you can see the sort of similarities and differences with a foil character that really illuminate what's going on. And then, of course, Mrs. Lind, Nora, and the nursemaid, all different combinations of have or had a husband, had or didn't have kids. In the case of Anne Marie, had to give up her kids for economic reasons. Somebody else raised her kids so that she could go raise little Nora, who had nobody, she had no mama. And daddy was just this sort of rich, super moral figure who turns out to have been a complete, I don't know, kind of shady character. He got in trouble with the law also, right? So anyway, foil characters, ladies and gentlemen. Number 8 asks you about Nora. What positive gains does Nora make in the course of the action? What must she learn in order to perform her final act? Is that act a triumph or a failure or some of both? I think it's a great question. What does she realize in the course of the action? She gains some independence. She understands what economic autonomy might look like if you had a job, and what it's like to earn money, your money, instead of having to hit up your husband and be like, he, I need, this or that, right? This notion of personal freedom for yourself. Who are you outside of the boxes that society has imposed on you, right? Again, we've talked about this. Blanch away your racial character, your class character, your gender and sexual character. What is left that is you? How much of how we define ourselves are these extraneous, relatively arbitrary social codes because they vary from society to society, right? Above all, she learns to question social and legal norms. Nora does. By being suddenly cast out of the box and being in the cold, only then can you really look back in and see the phoniness of it, or at least the social control. Don't you know what religion is, Nora? Torvald says. She's all, not really. I mean, Pastor Heisenrichsen or whatever told me it was this and that. I've heard the law is this. I mean, I need to go out and figure it out for myself. You can't just have people telling you how it is. You got to go try and probably make terrible mistakes and suffer and all that stuff. But that's what it means to develop as a human being, to be a self, an individual. Again, not just social product. What exists of you that matters to you outside of these labels and social categories, right? What does she learns the real possibility of a free self outside of a box, or a box that you create and choose to step into, like Mrs. Lind chooses to step into that traditional role of wife and mother, right? Is she oppressed? No, I think she knows what's going on with that role. She misses it. She wants to take care of somebody. Is she mind screwed by the society? I'm trying to be tactful with the language to believe that women are only nurturers. Maybe you could make that argument, but you're still left with a woman freely choosing to go into that role. And I would say that she's not oppressed, right? I know women who went to college, got degrees, and then they chose to be homemakers. Well, is that, oh God, some people are like, well, what a waste. She went to Berkeley or something, and she could have been a great engineer, and, she chose to be a mother. Well, come on, man, let's not condescend to domestic labors. We all have mamas who we love and who probably took care of us, and maybe they worked outside the home too, right? It's that great thing of the totally unvalued domestic labor that women do, and the fact that it's not somehow real contribution to the world or to society, right? Is Mrs. Linda, if Nora's free, does that mean Mrs. Linda's oppressed by going back into the box? No, it's not nearly that simple. And if you have some information and make an informed decision, then that's about all that freedom is within the parameters of your life, right? So it's a triumph in all sorts of ways, but in what sense is it a failure? She has this realization about Torvald. She's waiting for him to be the knight in shining armor, and he doesn't. Instead he scuttles like a roach out of the light and tries to be like, oh God, we've got to keep up appearances and let's live as brother and sister, instead of like letting everybody know that we, got a divorce and stuff. And Nora pretty much, so Torvald fails in his role as traditional masculine male. But Nora sure didn't put much effort into it. It's like, oh, the marriage is hollow. I'm just going to take my marbles and go home. It's like, you're going to end an 8-year marriage without even trying? What a child. And so we see Nora leaning out of the box and becoming more adult, but at the same time, she's still like a little child who's shaking her fists and stamping her feet. I'm leaving. I'm slamming the door. Nah, 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 nah. I'm going to go. Well, what are you going to find out there? Right? She comes off almost like a little girl at the same time that she comes off as this emerging woman. And I think that contradiction and paradox is really good too, because I think we are freeing ourselves and enslaving ourselves and being immature and mature at the same time. Reality is complicated. It's not easy to be a human being, right? Even if you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, like Nora, quite honestly, a spoiled little girl, right? But look, here's an opportunity for her, right? As far as Torvald goes, his huge failure obviously is not shouldering the blame. Nora keeps talking about the wonderful that she hopes is going to happen throughout the play. And the wonderful is that she thinks Torvald's going to sweep in and take all the blame and be like a man and protect her and stuff. And, he doesn't, right? So super disillusioned. He's not the man she thought he was. Torvald's bragging throughout the whole play about when the shit hits the fan, you're going to see what a real man can do. And then you look at that last scene, you're like, oh God, he went out like such a chump, right? Almost embarrassing. There's this last bit for question 8 about how the Germans made Ibsen change the ending. I'm just going to leave that out in the space. That's just, it's just kind of funny that the Germans would be more uptight than the Scandinavians or the Norwegians, right? But I think that's the Northern Germans. They're a little more politically liberal, but maybe a little more uptight socially, which is a contradiction too. But hey, I love the Germans. I'm not trying to talk any smack. But I think that's funny that the Germans wouldn't let him perform the play, because this play is dangerous. I mean, it's like, it's going to make everybody question their social roles and the daily functioning of society. Germans weren't going to have it. I'll wrap this up quickly. I don't want this to go too long, you guys. Number 9, Nora and Helmer is developing characters. Nora obviously develops in all these ways we just talked about. Torvald resists change like the plague. I mean, he's just like, he'll do anything rather than change or look for some formula outside of the dollhouse that they've established, right? But again, just like Nora is conceived of the notion of a real self, so is Torvald in a way. He's going to be forced to question all that stuff, or maybe he'll just get a new girlfriend or something and just replace her in that slot. But this question of, again, what is a real marriage? What would an egalitarian relationship look like? Well, I don't know, because our human interactions are so predicated on power dynamics and exertions of power that I don't know what that would look like. And if you defer over here and defer to, and someone else defers to you over here, how do you maintain a balance always? Well, you don't. But what does a good relationship look like outside of just playing roles and following a script, right? Again, the costume party or the constant performance. Nora's always performing to some extent, and of course we all are. That's what we're supposed to think. Walk away from this. Torvald has a thing for embroidery. He likes to sew, but there's just no way that he could ever cultivate that interest because it's girly stuff or something. So again, just notice the profusion of details that all line up when you connect these dots. It's a marvelously executed piece of literature. At least I think so, obviously, right? And really a template for what the theater would become for the next 50 years. Until Glass Menagerie came out, which we're not going to read, unfortunately. I know I mentioned we might read it. You should read it just because it's Tennessee Williams' first big play, but I'm not going to officially assign it. After we do this dollhouse stuff, we'll turn our attention to actually getting ready for the test. The test. Okay, cool. Who takes responsibility for the creating a dollhouse of the marriage? Neither character does. Actually, Torvald was not going to take responsibility for anything. And notice Nora's just like, I'm leaving. I'm done here. You know, really arguably very immature response, especially in this age of counseling, and you got to try to make it work and stuff. But, you know, really, you did say you were going to spend your life with this person. You did have kids with them. Maybe it's worth a try, you know? Um, Nora says, Torvald, you ain't the man I thought you were, and you ain't going to change as long as your doll's here. I'm leaving. Like for her, like that's the only way that Torvald is ever going to grow and develop. He has to be forced to, right? And I think that's very real and honest thing about humanity. Right? Number 10 asks about money, and you're sort of asked to rank their attitudes toward money, and then you're asked to rank the moral ends of the actions that they did. Do they need the money or did they just want to get ahead, right? Nora and Torvald's attitude toward money is it equals happiness. This is classic bourgeois freedom, right? If you have enough money, everything's going to be fine. Well, I mean, even the stupidest pop song will tell you, no, that's not the case. But I mean, people still buy into that, right? Lind and Krogstad, money seems to be necessary. But again, these are people who obviously value love and relationship, or did initially. It's just that Mrs. Lind really didn't have a chance but to Jill Krogstad back in the day. She had a mom and brothers to take care of, as we know, right? And that, for her, trumped herself. She sacrificed herself for the needs of others, which reflects what Nora talks about at the end, where Torvald's like, you have your most sacred duty is your role as wife and mother. And she said, no, I have more sacred duty, a more sacred duty. Who's that? Well, what's that to? Myself. All right. And again, what does that mean? We don't know. But is that important? Yeah, come on. We're 21st century Americans. We've developed this sense of our own self as, you know, who am I really? And I've got to discover it. I mean, that's what San Francisco is all about, right? You come from somewhere else to figure out who you are, which maybe seems a little ridiculous, but let's not laugh at all the people who've come here and found other ways to live outside of the incredibly proscriptive, oppressive confines of, you know, I always like to use Kansas as an example. Maybe that's not fair. Rank doesn't care about money. Why? Because he has it. So you don't have to worry about it. But again, notice how he's this lonely dissociate character who's just desperately trying to get into a box somewhere. You know, I think that's really significant and a little sad. Nora took out the loan because she loved Torvald. I think she really did. That's an example of, you know, not gain, but need, right? Or is it? It's complicated. Mrs. Lind jilted Krogstad. Was that for gain? Well, it's for survival. You know, it's not that simple. Krogstad, forgery, bad person, broke the law. You know, he probably did it to support his kids. He's a scrivener, this bottom-ranking bank official, and he's trying to make a living for him and his like 3 or 4 kids, right? So you decide how moral that is. Really, who are we to judge? And the blackmail for the job. Krogstad's going to blackmail Torvald, or Torvald via Nora, in order to maintain his job. All he wants is to keep his job, right? Is he such a bad person for that? Well, then he decides, I want to be equal to Torvald. So maybe you could say that's a desire for gain, right? He's trying to get up there with Torvald, or even displace Torvald at the top in this petty sort of economic positioning in the way that we compete in other forms of status and social position. Whose kid is most successful? Whose kid's going to Stanford? You know, parents just get crazy about that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's wrap this up. 11, consider the ways in which the marriage of Nora and Torvald is typical rather than uniquely theirs. I mean, yes, this plays a little dated, but mostly it isn't. And if you want to know how gender roles were in this country as recently as 1960, watch a show like Mad Men or something, right? Or watch something from the 50s where Leave It to Beaver or something, one of these horrible old shows where it's just so conformist and stifling nuclear family roles, right? The stunning thing is how little it changed really in gender roles and marriages between 1879 and let's say 1960. Think of the marriage ceremony where the father walks the bride down and literally hands her off like a possession to the husband, That's still encrypted in our wedding ceremony, right? So it's still this almost property relation. And so this larger reflection upon, again, what would a real marriage look like, a real partnership that's not some sort of economic arrangement, right? Yeah, I always thought we should get that out of the marriage ceremony. But Nora says this. So she says, well, I used to be daddy's little doll and I was handed off to you, right? To what extent are women still treated like that? Even in, San Francisco or something, or even in sometimes homosexual relationships where people still adopt the same gender dynamics, or there's still exertions of power in there, right? So yes, it's dated, but again, consider the way that these dynamics are still relevant after all these years. What happened after 1960 or so? Feminism, first wave feminism, 1969, 70, 71. That's where you first begin to see women as a group, at least in urban centers, start to look at the things Nora's gone through, the things that she's realizing, and starting to assert something like a real self or a real identity, that they see themselves as having agency in their own lives or some sort of selfhood outside of mommy, sex object, or virginal, some you're supposed to put up on a pedestal and worship, right? Number 12, use these motifs that they mentioned there to generate thematic statements on your book sum sheet, okay? They mentioned deception, honesty, self-deception, and self-discovery, right? That's pretty good. Use that as a motif. And what is Ibsen saying about those things, right? And don't forget this larger vision of humanity as engaged in this ridiculous sense of self and social position as a costume party, as a performance, as really a theater performance, right? When Rank actually tells Nora that he loves her, it's getting dark in there, and she brings the light over, remember? And then she's like, don't you feel silly for being honest now that the light's on? And it's this sense of we're playing roles now. We're back to being phony, right? The moments of honesty between human beings are so fleeting, and sometimes they don't exist at all, even in marriages, right? Number 13 is interesting. Here's an interpretation of a dollhouse. A dollhouse represents a woman imbued with the idea of becoming a person, but it proposes nothing categorical about women becoming people. In fact, its real theme has nothing to do with the sexes. It's the irrepressible conflict of two different personalities which have founded themselves on two radically different estimates of reality. In other words, gender has nothing to do with it. Gender has nothing to do with this play. I think that's ridiculous, but let's, for the sake of argument, look at that proposition. I mean, okay, it's two different personalities who are somehow irreconcilable, right? How's that true? Well, Nora's a spoiled daddy's girl. She's born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She never had challenge. She gets called out on this constantly, right? Oh, you don't know Jack. I mean, you're just a little girl who's just been swept through life. You have an easy life, Mrs. Lynde tells Nora, right? Yeah, so she's someone who's made that way. She's always been taken care of, and she's always been spoiled. Does that create a certain type of personality? Yeah, definitely. Look at Torvald. I think he's middle class, but he's not born rich. Look at the guy's work ethic. You got to work hard to rise up. They both believe that money equals happiness, but Torvald has maybe a more working class background. Does that create a different sort of personality? Yeah, maybe that's part of the dynamic in their relationship that hasn't worked, right? Above and beyond the simple, you're a man and I'm a woman, and that's what we've been taught to expect. Okay, good. If you're still with me, congratulations. I want to run through quick little visual. I have visuals for you. Looking at some of this switching stuff, this substitution stuff. Early in the play, we find out Mrs. Lynde is going to take Krogstad's job. So that box, Krogstad's out, and Mrs. Lynde's going to slide in. It's a perfect symmetry, right? Trip on this. I don't know if this is going to work ultimately. Hey, there's my kid. Now, let's try this. We have a teacher and two learners here trying to do this. Okay. So substitution and role switching, right? These boxes are gender boxes, class boxes, all this stuff, these boxes that society imposes upon us, right? Well, here you have the notion of wife and mother. At the beginning of the play, Nora's in the box of wife, mother. Mrs. Lynde is outside the box. But part of the beautiful symmetry of this play, where over the course of the play, Nora steps out of the box at the end and slams the door. Mrs. Lynde slides back into the box. And we talked about that that's conscious. Maybe Nora was stuck in the box and therefore it was oppressive to her. She found that it was. She had to leave. Mrs. Lynde knows what's in that box and she steps in. All right. It's kind of a beautiful thing. You got to admit. So the wife-mother angle on substitution. All right. Same thing happens with husband and love. Let's look at this one, husband and love. Torvald's in the box and Krogstad's out of the box at the beginning of the play. But even in Act 3, look at the perfect symmetry of Act 3. It starts with a declaration of love and a decision to return to their relationship, Krogstad and Mrs. Lynde, right? At the end of Act 3, Torvald is forced out of the role. Nora steps out of the role. It's another perfect symmetry, okay? Then you have the split notion of husband or lover. Nora's got Rank on one side. He's kind of like the confidant. Every husband should be a good confidant listener, but most of them aren't. So people look for that need elsewhere. Maybe in an adulterous relationship, or maybe just a really flirty, sexually manipulative relationship like you see between Nora and Rank. All right. Torvald is the societal face, the acceptable one. He is a lover. He can have sex, for example. Rank, probably not a good idea because of the whole syphilis thing. So he is literally not a sexual option and is a confidant. Torvald is not a confidant, is a sexual option, and the other superficial aspects of being a husband, right? Also, they both exert sexual power on Nora. Torvald brings Nora down in Act 3 from the costume party to have sex with her, and she didn't want to. He's like, hey, you are my wife. Again, wife as sexual object of husband. It's another sort of encrypted thing in this gender dance definition of marriage that we have. Bullshit. Anyway, she manipulates them sexually as well. They exert sexual power over her, but she uses her sexuality to get what she can or manipulate them, or right? And again, is she a terrible strumpet or something like that? No, this is some of the only ways that women, only avenues to power or the exertion of power, that women are given. And they're by God going to use them. Any form of power that anybody has, they're going to use in interpersonal relationships. And again, to what extent are all human relationships complex networks and schema of exertions of power, right? Back to Hunters in the Snow. Let's look at literary contrivances in terms of this substitution idea. Here you have the notion of the villain or the antagonist. At the beginning of the play, it's Krogstad. No question. I have the, fraudulent signature and I'm going to manipulate you, right? But by the end of the play, Krogstad has buried the whole thing. He's saved by love of all things. The villain is vindicated by love. And Torvald becomes really, I think, the villain or the antagonist. And I didn't seem to get too much pushback from you guys when I suggested that. Torvald is now the villain or the antagonist. But again, just look at the symmetry of it. And it works on so many other levels. These are just the basics that I'm trying to show you. Lastly, let's talk about economic exertions of power. In this play, economic exertions of power, not sexual, not gender, but in the workplace and thereabouts, right? So first of all, the notion of the job. You got Krogstad and Lynde. Krogstad was going to leave the job. Lynde slips back in. Now, of course, after they worked it out, they decide we're going to conform to our gender roles. So Krogstad, you get your job. I'm not going to take it. And Mrs. Lynde goes into the household when she was going to enter the workforce, right? And then again, Nora, what's her future with a job? If you read the 19th century husband's letter to the wife, she ain't going to find a job. She ain't going to find a job. When Mrs. Lynde shows up and asks Torvald for a job, he says, oh, you're a widow, huh? Right? And that's just the way it is. Women couldn't take out loans. They couldn't be economically independent at all. Some feminist discourse suggests that the first thing a woman should do is get her own bank account and establish herself so she achieves economic independence and doesn't become, dependent economically on men. The last thing is social position. Torvald is Krogstad's boss, but Krogstad has something on him, so he's going to blackmail him and try and, again, assert power from below through fraudulent means, illegal means, but try and get himself equal to Torvald. Why? So that he can take care of his freaking kids and restore his reputation. If you're the kid of a guy whose reputation's been destroyed by crime, then it's like, a label that follows you. And Krogstad is trying to, in good faith, think of the future of his children. Maybe he's not the most moral character in the play. I don't know. I'll leave that to you. The beauty of the play is it's not clear, as it shouldn't be, because you don't want a lesson. Ibsen's not giving you a lesson. He's giving you lots of stuff to think about. Okay. So that's all I got for you for now. Maybe too much. Finish the book sum sheet by Sunday. And I looked through the Google Docs receptions, getting work from some of you guys, but most of us have still not done the 19th century husband's letter to the wife. Please do that work and get it to me. I'll briefly review it on Thursday, and I will give you just one essay and a couple of questions that I want you to look at. This notion of, is Doll House a feminist play? Is it a feminist text? And Ibsen himself says no. So it's really interesting stuff. This play is uniquely suited to demonstrate intention of the author versus what the work becomes out in the larger culture, right? We interpret it for ourselves, which is the beauty of it, of course. Anyway, I hope you guys are well. I don't want to blitz you too much, but I really feel like I wanted to wrap up Doll House with something, as much grace as possible. I'll keep these dispatches. We may have Zoom conversations at some point, but I'm concerned about whether we all have our books. I'm hoping you have Perrine's. If not, it's going to be kind of difficult, but I'll figure something out. All right. So again, you guys, get me the letter work, the 19th century husband's letter to the wife, and those questions answered. And look at that essay. Choose 3 quotes that are interesting or illuminating or that you disagree with or whatever, and just respond to each of them. So 3 quotes, each with a 1-paragraph response. That's what I'm asking for that piece of work. All right. Aside from that, I'm assuming you guys are working on the book sum sheet, right? So take care of yourselves. And if you have any questions, send me something. Send me an email or something. And Wednesday, again, is office hours. So you can literally call me on the phone between 10 and 1. I'll answer and I'll talk to you. Or we can just do this email thing. All right. Anyway, take care of yourselves, you guys. And I will be looking at you soon. Not necessarily talking to you, but hopefully. Get your Perrine books if you at all can, and we'll figure it out from there. All right. Love you. Take it easy.